How to get your Google Ads suspension overturned. Getting your Google Ads account suspended for severe policy violations is an internet marketer's worst nightmare. But if it happened to you, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. You can get it overturned even if it's a permanent ban. The first year I became an SEM marketer, I had my Google Ads accounts banned. I was marketing a make money business opportunity. It was making wildly outlandish claims of money and success. Google didn't even give me a warning. They simply slapped the taste out of my mouth. Overnight, all of my accounts were suspended. Even to this day, the red bar of death haunts my dreams. As terrible as getting suspended was for me, my business, and my family, I was able to convince Google to reinstate my account. Now, I had to learn what I did wrong and make a lot of changes to my website, but in my experience and as a Google compliance consultant, this has been the same experience the majority of advertisers I work with have, that they're able to get a suspension overturned. Today, I'm gonna break down the steps to get your AdWords account, Google Ads account. Man, why did they ever change the name? It just confuses me. Google Ads account unbanned. Got it. There's 4 steps I take every client through to get their Google Ads account reinstated. And you'll typically need to do these same 4 steps. Look at your ad disapproval reasons first. If you've already been running Google Ads and you're getting disapprovals, then usually your suspension is related to those ad disapprovals. Suspensions are based upon your risk level as an advertiser. In Chapter 1 of Google Compliance Secrets, we tackle risk as a measure head on because risk sets the stage for everything that's going to happen when it comes to Google compliance. We go into depth the ins and outs of what makes you a risky advertiser. In short, Google suspended you because you're too risky to them, their brand, and to the searcher. Ironically, they almost never suspend you for violating policy. 100% compliance is not required by any advertiser to be able to run on Google. It's simply a measure of how risky you are as an advertiser to them because they don't want the trouble of a risky advertiser. For this reason, your ads will give a big clue as to where you were being risky with your account. If you click on the disapproval reasons and read the policy thoroughly, knowing these policies will be the key to you getting your Google Ads account suspension overturned. Here's the 2 areas I look at to determine why my ads are disapproved and what particularly may be causing my client's suspension, or back when I got suspensions, where I learned you need to look to understand what's going on. The first area is under this column here called status. You will notice in this particular example, there's a malicious software violation here. And at a glance, I can determine what may be going on with any particular ad. You will see there's also a +1 here. Now it isn't listed, but it's important to note that there may be 1 item associated with an ad disapproval. But I just don't really know just yet how it affects my suspension or if it's even contributing to that, which is why I like to enable a second column. You can see here, I enable the column called Policy Details. Policy Details is going to give me a much wider look at what may be the problem. You will notice there's only 1 reason listed for the disapproval, not 2. So even though my status has a +1, I can ignore the second reason. The only one that really matters in this particular case is the malicious software. However, when it comes to drilling down within the policy to understand what's affecting your suspension, you need to take a look at this next step. There is a particular hack in Google to understand what specific area in malicious software you need to pay attention to. Very few people understand that this even exists. If you click on that malicious software link, this help area will come up. And you'll notice, you'll see, here's a column for malicious software. There's several items in there with examples, and then it goes into other areas, unfair advantage, things like that, that are associated with the larger thing of abusing the ad network. Although there's multiple things in here, you don't really understand a lot of times what specifically applies to your ad.
Well, here's the hack that few people understand. If you notice, I'm gonna click this link again. When I click it, it drops me off on a very specific part of malicious software. And that is the part Google is trying to signal to you that you need to pay attention to concerning your ads, your website, your business, or if you have a suspension, what may be an indicator as to why you are suspended. Now, you can't just take one reason here. You have to look at all the disapproval reasons you have so that you can understand each policy that may be contributing to the reason why your risk level jumped so high that they needed to suspend your account. But this one little trick will help you tremendously when you're negotiating or when you're challenging and going back with Google when you call them in the later steps. Step number 2, read the policy they said you violated. As obvious as it sounds, you would not believe the amount of people who contact me for help who have no idea which policy they were even suspended for. Every suspension letter explains the reason for your suspension. Now, if you lost your email that told you everything, then simply look into your account at that big red bar of death at the top. Now, some of you are saying, I read that thing. The suspension reason was vague, such as for violating our terms and conditions. If you receive a vague reason like this, then that means Google may be keeping the reason private because they don't trust you. This is why step 1 is to look at your ads, as it may provide more clues as to your suspension. Even more clues than an email may give you in this situation. The vague response indicates that something even more serious or more difficult may need to be done to get this overturned, but it's not impossible. Vague reasons indicate an egregious violation was committed. However, even a vague reason will give you a clue to what you did wrong, as there's only a few egregious policy violations in the entire policy handbook. And the vague terms and conditions suspension is referring to one of these egregious violations. There's only a few of them, and they are circumventing systems, coordinated deceptive practices, counterfeit, promotion of an unauthorized pharmacy, unacceptable business practices, trade sanction violations, and poor online reputation. These violations are special and go beyond the scope of this training. Over the coming weeks, I will break down each of these in more detail. So make sure you subscribe to my channel and smash that notification bell. That way you can be alerted immediately when those videos are released. Now, after you completed step number 1, which is to check your ad disapprovals, step number 2, which is to actually read the reasons they suspended your account, then you're ready for step number 3, which is to finally call Google Ads on the phone. The reason we wait to step number 3 to call Google is because you have to be armed with some information before you talk to them on the phone. Most people that get suspended call Google immediately. They're all emotional and they do nothing but repeat, we didn't do anything wrong. Why am I getting suspended? We've been running this way for years with the same ad. Or they say something like, there's another advertiser doing it, and if they're allowed, why not us? You should take them down too. All very emotional, all not really based on Google Talk or how they do things, and it doesn't really get you anywhere. What it does is they just repeat the generic information, and they're going to tell you to do things that, quite frankly, may not even address the problem, because the reactive support are not policy experts. They do not understand Google Ads policy in the way you need for them to understand. And regardless of how much they understand, they certainly don't understand business enough to tell you specifically what you need to change on your website to make this work. When you talk to Google, it will be your responsibility to guide reactive support. Those are the people that actually answer the phone. Guide them to give you answers for you that is useful, that you can solve the problem. Listen, reactive support knows very little about Google Ads compliance, even though they work for the company. They only speak in terms of generalities based upon their training, what they've seen so far, and quite frankly, what they look up in the Wahala system for information. Many times, even what they see in their system is often vague answers, such as misrepresentation or misleading claims, or usually some other non-specific area that, although they're talking about a particular policy,
it doesn't exactly tell you on your website or what part of your website, business, or your ad that is the problem area. For this reason, you gotta be armed with information and guide the reactive support to be more specific. And the only way to do that is that you need to be more knowledgeable and talk in Google terms so that it makes them think you might know more than they do on this topic. You see, when they're talking to you, they're usually talking in Google Talk. What's Google Talk? It's the way they talk inside of that company. They're using the same language in their policies. They're talking about spirit of the policy and all these other little things and misrepresentation, egregious, all these kind of crazy words we don't actually use on a daily basis. This is all Google Talk, and you need to learn this language. You don't have to be a pro, you just need to speak to them the same way their policies are written. If you're able to speak to them in the same language, they're gonna take you much more serious, and it's going to actually make them escalate your case up to someone more knowledgeable, level 2, level 3, and you really want to get to a policy specialist because they're the ones that are actually going to give more specific information about what you actually are doing wrong. But this will only happen if you have a little back and forth challenge with that reactive support person that will force them to basically escalate this and get more narrow with getting information. Now, what's in the system may be correct about your suspension. You may have actually did what they said you did, but you don't know that yet. And the only way to really get specific answers is to do this process, challenge them, and make them do some critical thinking and ask some critical questions. Because if you approach them and you aren't armed with the right information, then you become at the mercy of whatever information they give you. And you end up doing a lot of things that don't work. But I tell you what's worse is requesting a re-review of your ads and your website when you don't know what's going on. If you request a re-review without making the corrections or changes to what the system is picking up, this mistake can lead to what Google calls a final decision of no. Don't request a re-review until you are certain that you can beat it and win the appeal. Then you're ready for step number 4, and that's to actually make the changes, or you make an appeal if you find out that the decision is incorrect. Armed with the correct information, you can get to work doing what the next step should be. Either make the corrections they're saying you need to do, or you need to file an official appeal if you know the decision is incorrect. Google gets the decision wrong a lot, so it's possible. For those of you that are told your suspension is permanent, know this: Google rarely gives a true permanent ban. Usually you simply need to make the changes they are requiring you to make and then request a re-review. However, if they're saying your ban is permanent and it isn't fixable, it really isn't permanent. Why? Because when you agree to Google's advertising terms and conditions, you effectively agree that Google reserves the right to kick you off their network for any reason. Although this surely can work in a negative way, it also can work in reverse as well, meaning Google reserves the right to reinstate an advertiser for any reason. This is why a permanent ban is rarely really permanent. If you make a convincing and compelling case for them to give you another chance, if the reasons are good enough, then you may get your account back. I've had many people hire me for help with circumventing systems, unacceptable business practices, or even low reputation sites and businesses. These are all egregious violations, and our agency has gotten them reinstated. Although it's not guaranteed that we're going to have success when it happens, it does happen. It doesn't mean you have no hope of getting unbanned if you have an egregious violation suspension. You just need a good sob story. Following these 4 steps has allowed me to help hundreds of suspended accounts get reinstated over the last 12 years. But you tell me what you think. Comment below if you've ever been suspended and you try to get reinstated. How did that go? What did you do? Did you follow these 4 steps in order? And if you did, what was your results? If you'd like more information about Google Ads policies and what you can do to avoid getting in trouble in the first place, grab a copy of my book, Google Compliance Secrets. I'll leave an Amazon link below where you can get your own copy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.